a nightmare to others.
Oh Lord! Oh Jesus Christ!
But I will give you a message. The message of death.
Oh yes! Come out to play.
Game over!
Make no attempt to capture them. They are to be exterminated.
Mrs. Beale, we're needed.
Matron, take them away.
Dada's
You took it from me. You took it from me. You took it from me.
Well, hello there,
Hello.
horror aficionados. As you can see, the middle-aged movie boys are back with another edition of We Need to Talk About ... And here, we're going to be completing our unholy trinity of folk horror.
So previously we have traversed the blood-soaked fields of rural England in the blood on Satan's claw, whilst getting stocked up on Vite for Men to tackle some excessive body hair.
And we have danced Billy Bollock naked around the burning effigy on Summerisle in the Wicker Man.
Well, you might have, but I certainly haven't. I'm not getting cancelled. At least, not yet.
And now, as the witching hour approaches, we turn our gaze to the final piece of this macabre puzzle, the infamous Witchfinder General. And it is time for you all to
Confess!
confess.
That's right, from the eerie halls of last year's Leeds Horror Film Festival to the spine-chilling shadows of our previous Halloween special, our journey through the darkest corners of British cinema has led us to this moment. Prepare yourselves for a tale of brutality, injustice, and paranoia that will make you grateful that you weren't born in 17th century England.
They must hang.
If you're wondering where the t-shirt came from, it's from Wiggy Pop Tees. They're an independent t-shirt maker. I said I'd give them a shout out.
Which is really wonderful. I love it. It's great.
I came across about this on Twitter. I was following a Twitter page on like Hammer Horror. And he said, oh, I'm sort of doing t-shirts. I was like, that's fucking brilliant, I'm ordering that. And I've even told him, it's like, we're doing it Witchfinder General, how soon can you get me a t-shirt? It's like, get one out in the post here, mate.
Yeah, absolutely superb. It's a great t-shirt.
Yeah. Whilst I think you need to step up your t-shirt game, because you are still wearing the same Gatchaman t-shirt that you wore in Future Cops and Street Fighter.
Yeah, that's because you've locked me in the bunker since then. Right? Forced imprisonment. I mean, the only...
We're not in the...
Wait a second.
Yeah, well, I wasn't going to say anything, but yeah, you really... Yeah.
Right, that's what happens. There we go.
Am I going to have to bring the hose out again?
Is that either that or to delouse me or something like that? I have no idea. Anywho.
Well, we're not in the bunker anymore.
No, we've moved bunkers.
Are we still are we calling this new room the bunker, or are we calling it something else?
I think we'll call this room the top room of Avengers Tower.
The top room. Well,
oh, there we go. We need to talk about towers.
Towers.
We need to talk about towers.
WNTTA towers.
Yes, that.
We've even got frosted glass.
Yeah.
It's like a cathedral in here.
Yeah. Because quite frankly, you're quite ungodly.
Yes. And I'm going to hell.
Well, that is where the good albums are.
Yes. And unfortunately, I may end up dragging you down there with me.
More than likely. Yeah. But again, that's where the good albums are.
Because, here was your moral compass before you met me, and now...
I don't think we can go that low. I'd like to think that I have, despite your influence, I have maintained my moral compass.
You came across me in a storm drain with a red balloon. Hey Luke, we all float down here, mate. However, before we go ahead and drive that final nail into the coffin of our folk horror trilogy, I do feel that we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Before we can truly immerse ourselves in the celluloid horrors of Michael Reeves' 1968 opus, we first need to look upon the historical tapestry from which this cinematic nightmare was woven. The silver screen's rendition of Matthew Hopkins' the self-styled Witchfinder General draws its macabre inspiration from a chapter of English history as grim as any pinned by Gothic romanticists. To fully appreciate the artistry of Reeves' vision, we must first confront the brutal reality that spawned it, a tale of persecution and terror that unfolded not in the realms of imagination, but in the very soil of 17th century East Anglia.
Not much is known about the real Matthew Hopkins, and what we do know about the real person that inspired Price's performance is generally quite vague. What we do know is that he was the fourth son of 6 children. His father was James Hopkins, who was a Puritan clergyman, and the vicar of St John's of Great Wenham in Suffolk. We don't exactly know his birth year either, but it was probably not before 1619, making him between 25 and 28 at the time of his death in 1647.
Hopkins moved to the town of Manningtree, Essex in 1644. An impoverished lawyer with a strong puritanical background, Hopkins appears to have seen it as his mission to destroy anything to do with the works of the devil. Hopkins believed that there were several witches regularly practicing their dark arts close to his home, and apparently began his career as a witchfinder after he overheard various women discussing their meetings with Beelzebub. Of the 23 women accused of witchcraft, 4 were said to have died in prison, with 19 later convicted and hanged. Coincidentally, all of them had knocked back Hopkins' sexual advances. Funny that. Hopkins appears to have assumed the title of Witchfinder General in 1645, claiming to have been officially commissioned by Parliament.
No, he wasn't.
With the brief to uncover and prosecute witches.
No, he really wasn't.
Together with his entourage that included a merry band of lady prickers.
I'm sorry, they were called what?
You heard me. They travelled the villages and towns of eastern England, trying and examining women for witchcraft.
Of course, all of this came at a very reasonable price, said to be around about 20 shillings a town, although records do reveal that the small market town of Stowmarket pays £23 for his services. Hopkins appears to have quickly turned his mission into a very well-paid career, so much so that local taxes were even being levied in order to fund his obsession.
Many of the methods that Hopkins adopted to investigate these cases of witchcraft were taken directly from King James's bestseller, Demonology. Yes, the King of England and Scotland was so fascinated by the black arts that he wrote a book on the subject. He even convinced Parliament to pass the Witchcraft Statute of 1604, which ruled witchcraft as a crime punishable by death.
And although considerably less violent than those methods adopted in mainland Europe, they did include keeping the suspect awake for days on end, resulting in the suspect now suffering from sleep deprivation, being coerced into confessing to almost anything.
He confessed, you heard him.
I've heard nothing yet, Master Hopkins.
Refresh Master Salter's memory, Sterne.
You heard him.
You did too.
Yes, Master Hopkins.
Witnesses.
And you can get the same results after binge watching your favourite programme on Netflix. Other streaming services are obviously available. Now, the film shows Hopkins and Sterne employing various interrogation techniques such as sleep deprivation and ducking. This unbelievably simple but effective test involved binding the arms and legs of the accused to a chair before throwing them into the village pond. If they sank and drowned, they would be innocent and received into heaven. If they floated, they would be tried as a witch. Whilst torture was technically illegal in England in 1645, Hopkins was known for his broad interpretation of what did and what didn't constitute as torture. Hopkins doesn't actually do the torturing himself. Oh no, he is reluctant to get his hands dirty, but that is what he has Sterns for.
Now, a couple of times through this review, we are going to be making comparisons to The Blood on Satan's Claw because it was made by the same film studio and
same distributor and what have you, so yeah.
I do feel, though, that the ducking scene was better in The Blood on Satan's Claw, as it highlights just how stupid this practice is. It's like, all right, well, if she drowns, then she's not a witch, and that's fine. But if she floats, she's a witch. But as the guy points out in Blood on Satan's Claw, if she drowns, you've done a murder. And they're like, oh shit.
Yes, but does she weigh the same as a duck?
Well, again, this is why I felt that as good as these ducking scenes were in Witchfinder General and The Blood on Satan's Claw, I still feel that Monty Python did it best.
Absolutely.
She turned me into a newt. I got better. One may cheekily observe that the only thing Hopkins did that probably isn't on the menu at Guantanamo Bay was finding and piercing the Devil's Mark. This is where we come on to the work of those previously mentioned lady prickers.
The Devil's Mark was supposedly a teat that witches used to suckle imps, usually concealed as a mole or a wart. It was said that the mark would not hurt or bleed if pricked with a pin. Now, the film shows Hopkins' assistant going at people's freckles with a dagger, seemingly not getting the message that they're yelling and bleeding all over the place. But this would have been of little use anyway, as the real Hopkins fabricated matters by having a special retractable pin made, ensuring that there was an exceedingly high conviction rate.
The Rotter. Between the years 1644 and 1646, Hopkins and his associates are believed to have been responsible for the deaths of 300 women. And in the days when an average farm worker's wage was just sixpence a day, it is estimated that Hopkins may have collected fees of around £1,000 for his gruesome services. Nice work if you can get it, mate.
Hopkins even wrote a short pamphlet detailing his witch hunting methods, The Discovery of Witches, which was published in 1647. His own end, however, is far from clear. Some accounts say that he drowned, undergoing his own swimming trial after being accused of witchcraft himself, although the more likely cause of death was tuberculosis. Serves him right, the unbelievable shit.
So now, having established the historical backdrop, we now turn our attention back to Reeves's cinematic interpretation, where Hopkins' infamous legacy becomes a chilling cinematic experience. Let's begin with the plot, as we find ourselves set within the backdrop of the English Civil War.
This 1968 British horror film presents a heavily fictionalised account of the real-life murderous exploits of Matthew Hopkins, a lawyer from Suffolk who falsely claimed to have been appointed as a Witchfinder General by Parliament to root out sorcery and witchcraft.
Directed by Michael Reeves and starring Vincent Price in all of his wonderful scenery-chewing glory.
I am Matthew Hopkins, Witchfinder.
This low-budget production has since become a cult classic, despite, or perhaps because of, its disturbing content and brutal portrayal of 17th century witch hunts. From the very first scene, which sees a woman being dragged screaming on the way to the gallows, it sets the macabre tone for what the rest of the film is going to be like.
Now, for the benefit of our American viewers, Witchfinder General was released in the United States under a different title, The Conqueror Worm, as distributor American International Pictures wanted to link it with their early series of Edgar Allan Poe adaptations that also starred Vincent Price. Now, it's not really a title that makes any sense compared to what is portrayed on screen though. Hopkins, played by Price, and his sadistic assistant John Sterne, played with disturbing glee by Robert Russell, roam the rural countryside accusing, torturing and executing supposed witches. Although Reeves didn't like the voice of John Sterne that Robert Russell did, so he had him dubbed over in post-production, which is fairly obvious.
Look, he still prays to Satan.
Get on with your task.
Wait a minute, a badly dubbed villain? What is this, a Godfrey Ho film?
Thankfully not. The narrative centres on Richard Marshall, played by Ian Ogilvy, a roundhead soldier who swears bloody vengeance on Hopkins after the Witchfinder and his assistant preys upon his lovely fiancée Sarah and executes her priestly uncle John Lowes. Driven by revenge, Marshall deserts his military duties to hunt down and kill Hopkins and Sterne, fully aware that his actions could lead to a court-martial and potentially his own execution for abandoning his post.
Ronald Bassett's Witchfinder General, a novel loosely based on historical Hopkins and Sterne, was published in 1966. Tony Tenser, the founder and chief executive of Tygon British Film Productions, read Bassett's book whilst it was still going through its proofreading and editing process. And despite the book not yet being published, he purchased the film rights on impulse, feeling that there was enough scope in the book for a film. Now,
the film does take some creative liberties with the original novel. For example, Vincent Price was in his late 50s when he portrayed Hopkins, who would have actually been in his 20s in around 1645. Yet despite this, Witchfinder General manages to paint a surprisingly accurate picture of 17th century witch hunts. The film depicts Hopkins as a cynical, greedy, misogynistic man who successfully manages to manipulate the credulous general public, a portrayal that aligns with historical interpretations of the real Matthew Hopkins motives.
It's a fitting end for the foul ungodliness in womankind.
Yes, sir.
Hopkins uses fear and superstition to rule over the rural countryside whilst obtaining some heavy-looking bags of coins for his supposed services. And he even uses his position of power to get his leg over.
Shocking, and it's not even the right time for afternoon tiffin.
It's always time for tiffin.
Yeah.
Strange, isn't it, how much iniquity the Lord vested in the female?
Hopkins keeps saying over and over that he is doing God's work.
Keep at it, Sterne, you're doing God's work.
but it's not what you would describe as someone who is morally good. But why exactly does Hopkins do any of this? Is it for money? Power? Women? Sadism? Simple misogyny? Does he really believe in all this witchcraft superstition?
You enjoy torture, don't you, Sterne?
And you, sir?
The lack of an answer is telling.
Price is not a fun, campy character like he is probably better known for in his other films. This is partly due to Reeves telling him almost constantly to tone it down. And as a result, Price's performance captures the sanctimonious, icy sleaziness of the real Hopkins that was described as in the book with chilling precision.
Indeed, you get the impression that Hopkins and Sterne enjoy their work, but they certainly don't seem to enjoy each other. They clearly have no trust for each other, and during a moment when Hopkins leaves Sterne to his fate, when the pair of them are confronted by a group of soldiers, it does look like Sterne is going to become an enemy of Hopkins when they eventually reunite. But they quickly get back on the same page once Hopkins flashes his flintlock pistol and a bag of gold coins in Sterne's direction. Now, you wonder if this side story was put in to pad out the running time, as at 1 hour and 22 minutes, it's still slightly under feature length. Oh, and by the way, was that Albert Steptoe trying to sell Sterne a horse?
It certainly was, you dirty old man.
Harold! Witchfinder General faced its share of challenges during its production, but then again, of course it did. That's why we're covering this film on this here show.
It's kind of our raison d'etre these days. The film had a shoestring budget of under £100,000, so as much as possible had to be done to cut costs when filming. So for example, in the scene where Marshall is chasing after Sterne, you might not realise this, but they're actually riding the same horse.
But the most notable challenge to the film's production was the infamously tense relationship between director Michael Reeves and star Vincent Price. Ooh. Now, Reeves had wanted Donald Pleasance for the role of Matthew Hopkins, and oh boy, did he let everyone know about it. But AIP were putting up a large portion of the budget, and so they had insisted that Price be cast in the role. Reeves then complained to anyone who would listen that he was now stuck with using Vincent Price.
Yeah, as if that's a hardship. Anyways, moving swiftly on. Word of this got back to the American actor before he even arrived in the UK to begin filming. And needless to say, Price was not happy about the disrespect that Reeves had shown him. And the two men found themselves at odds with each other. In fact, their conflict gave rise to the oft-quoted exchange,
"Young man, I've made 84 films. What have you done?"
"I've made 2 good ones." I know.
In one scene, Reeves told Price that he needed him to shoot his flintlock pistol between the ears of the horse he was riding. Price's response to this was, "What? You want the gun to go bang between the ears of this fucking nag? How do you think he's going to react?" However, Reeves insisted, and when the inevitable happened and the horse reared in fright when the gun went off, Price was sent tumbling to the ground. Luckily, Price was not injured, but he was extremely angered by the incident.
Back then in sort of 40s, 50s and 60s Hollywood, actors and actresses would have been expected to know how to ride a horse.
Yep. Peter Cushing,
Christopher Lee,
they could ride horses, they could fence with swords.
Exactly. So they would have
skills.
Yeah, they would have done all of this. So at some point, he has been in a film where he's been riding a horse, and probably a props master, a stuntman, or something like that has basically went to him, point your imitation gun or flintlock like that, and we'll do the sound effect later. And he's probably asked, well, why would I do that? Because this will happen.
Yeah, because you will scare the shit out of the horse.
And the horse will kick you off.
Yeah. I think it's safe to say that Price knew more about horses than what Reeves did.
I think it's a fair bet that would be it. Yeah. One of the main reasons that Reeves did not want Price in his film was because when he was writing the film, Reeves envisaged Hopkins as a snivelling, pathetic, ridiculous figure who falls off his own horse while trying to mount it, and so he would be exercising his own inadequacies in the torture of others. This is the character that Reeves had created, and this is why he had envisioned Donald Pleasance when writing the part. Now, when Vincent Price was instead cast in the role, again at AIP's insistence, the part of Hopkins had to be rewritten completely. Filming hadn't even started yet, and Reeves was already starting to feel that he was losing control of his own film.
In the original version of the character, the Donald Pleasance version, the character's insecurity was on display for all to see. But here, it's held back, only glimpsed on a few rare occasions. Unlike Sterne, who seems to get a sick pleasure out of doing what he does, Hopkins recognises that there's something fundamentally fucking wrong with him. But although this self-awareness exists, it never makes him a sympathetic character. He is, and remains as, a monster in human form.
I'm going to place this iron on your back. Should you faint or cry out, we can only take it that Satan has intervened to spare you your agony.
And with each execution, he keeps pushing the envelopes to see how far he can get with his cruelty. We start off in the film, it's just a simple hanging. We come to the second one, he's drawn a crowd. It's like, right, we're going to dunk him in the water and see who floats and who doesn't. By the time we come to the burning of Elizabeth Clark, he's putting on a show, and he now believes in his own legend.
By the way, do you know what they call me now? What? Witchfinder General. There are those who think that I should be appointed such for all of England.
In the film's shocking finale, Hopkins arrests both Sarah and Marshall with the intention of getting them both convicted of witchcraft.
Will you describe your evidence to us?
I observed the accused talking with their familiars. Black Cat and a stoat, sir.
You're a very observant citizen, Master Webb.
Is that all? Just the two? Well, the real Hopkins got one woman to confess to having several familiars, and Luke is going to read them out to you now.
Oh, for God's sake. Yeah, thanks for that. Right. There was News, a polecat, Jamara, a fat spaniel with no legs, Vinegar Tom, a greyhound with the head of an ox that could turn itself into a 4-year-old child with no head, and various others with such names as Alamanza, Piewacket, Grizzle, and Greedy Gut. Why do you make me say these things out loud? Really? Why?
Hopkins wrote that these names are ones that only the devil could have come up with, that these names are ones that no mortal could invent.
Really? He's obviously never met Elon Musk's kids.
Oh? Marshall is forced to watch as needles are repeatedly jabbed into Sarah's back, but he refuses to confess to witchcraft, instead vowing over and over that he will kill Hopkins. As Marshall's army comrades arrive and force their way into the castle dungeon, Marshall is able to break free from his bonds and brutally attacks Hopkins with an axe.
The scene where Hopkins is attacked with the axe took place on the final day of shooting, and Price had showed up to the set visibly intoxicated. Reeves was furious and ranted to producer Philip Waddilove, "He's drunk. How dare he be drunk on my set? I'll kill the bastard." Waddilove soon discovered that Reeves planned to inflict painful revenge on the actor.
During preparations for Hopkins' violent death scene, the director was overheard instructing Ogilvy to really fucking lay into Vincent with the stage axe. When the scene was filmed, Ogilvy responded with blows that were not faked. But Waddilove had thankfully fitted Price's costume with some extra padding, protecting the actor from injury.
Now, the soldiers enter the room to rescue Marshall and Sarah, but are horrified to see what their friend has done. One of them, Marshall's friend Trooper Swallow, puts the horribly mutilated but still living Hopkins out of his misery by shooting him dead with his flintlock pistol. Having been denied the opportunity to kill Hopkins himself, Marshall's mind finally snaps.
You took it from me! You took it from me!
The film originally had an even bleaker ending, as Trooper Swallow would have ended up having to shoot his friend Marshall dead as well, due to him going insane. However, as flintlock pistols can only fire one charge, this would have been historically inaccurate, and as a result, Marshall does indeed survive the film. But nevertheless, the film completely subverts audience expectations of a happy ending. Instead, we're left with a sense of horror, as both Marshall and Sarah appear to descend into madness as the film comes to an end.
It's definitely not a happy ending, is it?
It's not one to be watching with your wife or girlfriend, I
No,
don't think.
definitely not. Definitely not. Now, throughout the film, Reeves doesn't hold back at all. Now, we might not see the absolute worst of the violence. It will cut away to a shot of something else, but there is enough to make the film disturbing and downright uncomfortable to watch at times.
There is a fair amount of blood being spilled in this film, but it's this bright, vivid red colour. It looks more like the poster paint that we used at school when we were kids.
Yeah.
A similar thing happens in Dawn of the Dead when the guy's getting ripped away from the heart pressure machine.
Yes.
There's all this blood being spurted about, but it's this bright neon red colour, like paint.
Yeah, so you immediately realise that that's not real blood.
Yeah.
So
it doesn't look real in the slightest. But the violence in this film isn't necessarily gory. It's relentless, it's suffocating, and crucially, there is little in the way of hope or redemption for our heroes, Marshall and Sarah. They're not getting that happy ending that one would expect. They're not going to be holding hands and walking into the sunset here. Both of them have been absolutely shattered by their encounter with the Witchfinder General, physically, mentally, and emotionally, and they will likely never, ever recover from it. Despite their differences, Price later wrote Reeves a 10-page letter praising the film and finally understanding what the young director had envisioned and wishing that the communication between the two had been better. He would later consider it to be one of his best films, and Witchfinder General would go on to become a cult horror classic. Unfortunately, it came after Reeves' untimely death just 9 months after its release due to an accidental overdose. He was only 25 years old.
It's a great shame that Michael Reeves passed away so young. He was making his third film. I think he'd been assistant director of one film, and he did another 2 films previously. One was called The She Beast, and then there was another one a couple of years previously as well called The Sorcerers. Actually, both of which we got here. Hang on a minute. Wait a second. Shameless plug.
On cue.
On cue. So 88 films.
So what have you brought to show the class today?
I brought to show the class. They've done a deal with Tygon. So they're doing Tygon collection of films. So Witchfinder General is here. They've also done Blood on Satan's Claw. Sorcerers has just come out as well, which is the other Michael Reeves film. The Sorcerers itself had Reeves working with another classic horror actor in that of Boris Karloff. So he's in that one. He was working in the UK at the time he was doing.
Is this next year's Halloween special then?
Could be next year's Halloween special. It's actually very, very interesting. So it's all a kind of like a science fiction-y type of horror thing. So it's.
Do you know? I don't think I've seen that one. So
it's an interesting film. Again with Ian Ogilvy, because both he and Reeves were very, very good friends. So Reeves was sort of casting Ogilvy in his.
Casting his mates in his films.
Casting his mates in his films.
Yeah.
I mean, not that that's ever been done ever before. A number of years after Reeves' passing, Price said, "I realised what he wanted was a low-key, very laid-back, menacing performance. He did get it, but I was fighting him every step of the way. Had I known what he wanted, I would have cooperated." Although not initially categorised as such upon its release, Witchfinder General has since earned its place alongside other revered British cinematic horror titles like The Blood on Satan's Claw and The Wicker Man.
Now, we've mentioned The Blood on Satan's Claw a few times. I should point out Oliver Cromwell is actually portrayed in the film, and he's played by the same bloke that was the judge, the Witchfinder.
Yes,
in
Patrick Wymark.
Patrick Wymark, yes, he was the judge, the Witchfinder in The Blood on Satan's Claw, and he depicts Oliver Cromwell as this foul, warty fellow. He's seen devouring chicken legs and belching mightily.
It's because at that point, when was this made? 1968. So I think it was around about this time that the film Cromwell was out.
Yes.
And they had Richard Harris playing Cromwell. Didn't have the wart. That's all I'm saying. Apparently, historically, it's a historical fact that Oliver Cromwell had a massive red wart on his face. Yeah. Richard Harris didn't really have that.
Probably wasn't keen on having the
probably wasn't keen on that. But that's an interesting thing as well. Is sort of historically, the costumes and what have you are really, really good. Sort of the rounded costumes are really, really good. The period details really, really good within the sets and what have you. Whether or not the rest of it is historically accurate, okay. We'll give you a little bit of dramatic license with that.
Well, one thing it certainly does have, I mean, although it may be historically accurate with a pinch of salt, it does have some absolutely wonderful cinematography showing the beautiful shots of the English countryside, which is a massively stark contrast to the horror and violence that goes on around it.
It is kind of like, oh yeah, look at all of this beauty, this rolling hills, this sceptred isle, this England, and then next thing you know, it's confess your sins.
It's a poor lass being dragged to the gallows. Come on, let's be having you.
Come on, let's be having you.
Act all fucking day.
Yeah. I've got another 3 women that I need to burn at the stake after you when I'm on the bloody clock. Yeah.
Speaking of the clock, is it time for us to clock out?
I think it can be time for us to clock out. I think that's, wow. Well done. Yeah, nice segue. I like that.
Shall we head off to the nearest tavern for some ale and some wenches?
Oh.
We are in Leeds after all.
Right, you know how we've been saying that we're going to get cancelled this year? I think that's around about the time that we've been getting cancelled, saying that, all Leeds is... Actually, you put up a fair point, really, yeah. A wenching we will go.
Right. Hello. So, we are currently in the Salts Bar.
Yeah, we're down to Salt.
And you can tell we're in the Salt Bar because the purpose of beer is to create pleasure. And I can't argue with that.
No one can really when you think about it.
Right, so...
Cheers to your very, very good help.
Indeed, there we are.
Lovely. Right, yes.
So, Witchfinder General, it's probably not been the most comfortable watch that we've ever had to do this season. I mean, certain things like Street Fighter and Highlander 2 that we've covered previously, you can enjoy them because they are
bonkers.
And there's a certain amount of enjoyment to get from it.
Yeah. I mean,
with Witchfinder General, it is a good film, but my God, you will not get enjoyment from it. It is a bit of a slog.
You've got to be in the right frame of mind for it. And if you're not in the right frame of mind to sort of approach it and what have you, you will switch it off and walk away from it. It's not a pleasurable watch. The ending is not a happy ending in any stretch of the imagination because, quite frankly, they all end up now.
Then again, though, happy endings and folk horror do not tend to go hand in hand with each other.
They don't.
I'm seeing the Wicker Man and the Blood on Satan's Clock for more details.
And maybe that's a defining trait for the genre. The performances are very, very good.
Particularly from this gentleman.
Particularly from that gentleman. I would say that this is Vincent Price's most menacing performance on screen. He did not get on with Michael Reeves, the director. They were at loggerheads, but ultimately came to understand what he was actually getting at. Don't do Vincent Price things, do it this way.
Tone it down, tone it way down.
And the way that he did it is brilliant. For want of a better phrase, Ian Young will be the hero of the film, Richard Marshall, who, again, has been in Michael Reeves' previous films because they were friends, they were good friends. This is him in 1968. A good few years before his fame goes absolutely and utterly stratospheric.
I was waiting for you to mention this. Yep.
Yes, because around 10 years after this film comes out, he gets to play the famous Simon Templar.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Otherwise known everybody as the Saint. So he gets cast in Return of the Saint, and that's when things just go. That's international hit. He's known worldwide, and again, like another famous gentleman who also played the famous Simon Templar, he then gets his name gets mentioned in the mix for taking over for Roger Moore.
Yep.
He takes over for Roger Moore as the Saint, and then he gets perhaps he plays Bond as well. They went with Timothy Dalton at the time.
He would have made a very good Bond. You can see that from this performance here.
He's a really, really lovely actor. He always comes across brilliant. He's playwright and novelist as well. He always comes across really, really well. Vincent Price, on the other hand, again, talking about so many different avenues and what have you. Really, really wonderful to have 3 of the main cast in this movie, Hilary Dwyer was Sarah and Vincent Price. They had so many different things going on. Hilary Dwyer became a producer. Run a talent agency. Vincent Price, he's a Renaissance man. He had the amount of things outside of acting. He's wonderful. He loved art, he loved fine art, he wanted to make art accessible to everybody. And he did that. There's a Vincent Price Museum in the States in LA. Hell,
a man of many talents.
This guy wrote cookery books.
Yeah.
He had his own cookery program.
If you can believe that. And he was in the 13 Girls in Scooby-Doo.
And he was in 13 Girls in Scooby-Doo.
So this has been our Halloween special, even though we are actually filming this at the arse end of August, and it's beautiful and sunny outside, and we've got a cold beer and whatnot.
I know, it's absolutely superb.
But you know, it's still our Halloween special because we like to film these things in advance.
Yes, we do.
I think the first episode in our new, well, not the bunker, but in the tower, WNTTA Towers. I think it's gone.
Well, we're going to have that on the t-shirt.
I think that's gone very well, and I look forward to our Christmas special, which we've already agreed upon, which you will find out what that is when you watch the bloopers video. Right, and on that bombshell, we bring this video to a close. So, please, if you've enjoyed this video, do leave a like and a comment. Do subscribe to the channel if you've enjoyed it. Ring the notification bell, which is just popping up on screen.
Somewhere here.
Share this across your usual social media gubbins.
Please do.
Whilst you're at it, you may as well follow us on our social media. We are currently on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, OnlyFans, Grindr, Tinder, Just Eat.
4 of those we're not on. We leave it to you to figure out which.
Let's enjoy our drink and celebrate Halloween, if you like.
Halloween in August.
Trick or treat.
Sunglasses on. Let's go and get some rays.
Let's go get some sun rays.
Yeah.
Catch you next time.
See you guys.
Souls in the neon lights, tales of beer and movie nights, bonding over the lore of Zardos so deep. Those classic films they love to keep. Kung fu flicks and sci-fi bright, rose-tinted glasses in the night. Tales of a hero with sword in hand. Fire up the drinks, my friend. Middle-aged movie boys, living out classic joys. We need to talk about nostalgia loud and bright. We're time travelers in this bar, movies old and drinks from far. Cheers to films from days gone by. Raise a glass, let's touch the sky. Spy shenanigans, smoky rooms, horror marathons till daylight looms. Bite the apple, go into a trance. Where did you get those golden hot pants?